Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we are going to talk about how to turn an idea into all of the plans and blueprints and specifications that a manufacturer needs to produce your product as a batch or volume production. So if you've ever had an idea and wondered how to turn it into a manufactured product, then this video is for you. Make sure you watch right until the end because we're going to talk about all those necessary steps and strategies to go from that initial back of an envelope sketch right the way through to the production plans. And there's some essential information at the end that you need to bear in mind. The first step is all about validating your idea. It's going to cost a lot of money to develop it, to prototype it, and to put it into production. And you don't want to go through all that time and effort and wasted funds if it's not actually going to sell. Now, validating an idea is a relatively complex process. And as we go through the rest of this video, you'll gain valuable insights about how to do market research and when to get feedback on your product. So make sure you keep watching for that. But during this stage, this is where the key validation really needs to happen. I haven't got time to go into all of that depth in this video, but there's a PDF in the description. Do check that out. It's entirely free and it goes through a 10-step validation plan. Effectively, what you're trying to do is make sure that you can make your product for about a quarter of what people will be prepared to pay for it. That will then allow enough margin in there for you to make a profit, and then any retailer that you're selling through, or to give you some money to do direct to consumer advertising and run an e-com website. That's roughly the ratio you need to be working on. And so getting to a manufacturing price and also getting to a price that potential customers are prepared to pay are two critical pieces of information, and they're the critical parts of the validation process. Now, with some ideas, it's possible to validate it without doing much design and development work, but with other ideas, actually you've got to go through most of step 2 first, and that is where we design and prototype the idea. Basically, you're proving out the concept, making sure it's going to work, and then refining all those key details, like the size of the buttons and the ergonomics of any handle, and that it functions correctly, and that it's really adding value in terms of the end customer experience. You're also sorting out things like the aesthetic details, the materials, finishes, touch points, texture breaks, all those really critical details of the product that affect not only how it looks, but also how it works. Now, for this, for most projects, you're going to need a professional product design firm. Again, there's a great PDF. It's in the description below about how to choose the right product designer to work with for your project. And again, coming back to the first point, you do want to make sure that within your product design process, there's plenty of market research and feedback. But top tip, don't start doing any market research on things until you've actually got some intellectual property protection in place. You can use confidentiality agreements, but ideally you've got patents or registered designs filed before you start revealing your big idea. So once you've got a defined product and you've done some market research and you're reasonably confident that you've got the right thing that solves a genuine problem and it's going to be a success in the market, then what you can start doing is sourcing the right manufacturing partner. Now, this process is relatively complicated again. There's quite a lot involved, and you're going to need to take key decisions like, do you want to make it in China? Can you afford even to make it in the UK? Are your customers going to be prepared to pay a lot more if it is manufactured over here to make that work? You also need to be thinking about things like logistics and the cost of shipping, packaging, and all of those kind of other elements as well. Now, if you've worked with a professional product designer, and my company can help if you haven't got one yet, check out the link in the description below and book a call with one of my experienced designers on the team, then what you'll have is CAD models and prototypes, and the key thing now is to turn that into something that can be manufactured. Now, we work very closely alongside the manufacturer at this stage because they know their capabilities better than anyone else, and they also have huge amounts of value engineering experience. And if we can combine that with the skill set of the product designer on the project, then you get something that not only is appealing to your end customer, that works really well, but also that it's cost effective to put into production. And often a manufacturer will get involved quite early with our process, but that isn't always the norm. Once the production engineers have been involved and we've decided on the strategy for manufacturing the product, then we can create a manufacturing specification. Now this has replaced what you might think of as blueprints. Blueprints don't really exist anymore. Instead is a manufacturing specification document that talks about all the different components, how many of each component there are in there, any particular materials or finishes and all those kind of details. And they'll also need what's called step files. Now these are a university recognized CAD format. CAD is computer aided design, so often the product, particularly if it's hard goods, plastics and metals, that type of thing, is designed using this 3D software, and you can output from that step files. And that basically gives the manufacturer all the detail of the product in terms of the different components, the geometry, the dimensions, and the manufacturer can use all of that then to plan the production of your product and also get you an accurate cost. It's worth double checking your commercial viability at this stage. Now that you've got an accurate quotation for your product and you know where it's going to be made, you can look at all of those costs, including bringing it into the country where you're going to sell it, and then work out, is this still viable? It is unfortunately the case that some projects just aren't viable and prove at this stage to be too expensive for the market to bear. There are some ways around this, sometimes with value engineering or stripping certain features out of the product, but the critical thing is before you commit to production and all the costs of that, to make sure that the project still works financially. We're going to come on to talk about how you manage production timelines and make sure that all of this happens in a timely fashion. That's for later on in the video, so make sure you keep watching for that. And in the meantime, please hit like, hit subscribe. It makes a massive difference to the channel. Producing a quality product is absolutely critical. That is how you maintain your brand value, how you get good reviews on your product, and how you build future repeat sales. And managing that process is not easy. Your manufacturing specification is going to be critical, but you'll also probably need a quality control document, and you'll need a whole process for testing in there as well. Now there's two types of testing. One is the kind of required testing to achieve certain standards and certifications that you might need to sell a product. For example, I launched the pushchair that you see behind you with John Lewis. That had to have EN71 standard testing. It had to get through that standard, get through all the defined tests, otherwise it wouldn't be legal to sell it. But there's a different type of testing as well, and that really is about quality. Because although that product can get through the required tests, it might still not be a durable, quality, long life product. And so we had to put a whole load of different tests in there to make sure the manufacturer had done a good job. For example, the stitching could all be wonky. It would still get through the standards testing, but it wouldn't be something we'd want to sell at a premium price to our customers. So we had to do a visual inspection on the stitching to make sure that actually it's all straight and neat and looks good. So all of that needs thinking about and putting in place before you press go on your first batch run. Now, I said I'd come back and talk a bit more about market research during the process, and this is always the point where I would suggest you validate that the project is still commercially viable and that it's still something that customers want and are prepared to pay for. It might be at this point you start talking to retail buyers, particularly if you've got your intellectual property in place, and make sure that you've got some potential for orders once the product's produced. I have had a client previously who ordered a container load of 16,000 fluffy dog heads. He just wanted to go for it, but that product didn't sell, and then he ended up throwing all of those away. Don't make the same mistake. Only go into production once you have some level of reassurance that you're actually going to be able to sell the product. The next thing to sort out with your manufacturer is timelines, and also potentially scaling up production should your product really take off and start to fly. Now this is where the relationship with the manufacturer is key. You really need to visit, to sit down, talk to them face to face and plan it all out in a detailed fashion so that your expectations are effectively communicated to your manufacturing partner and they know what's expected of them. Now, depending where you manufacture, there can be cultural difficulties here. For example, working with Chinese factories, a lot of the time they'll just say yes, 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 and then not actually deliver. So you do need to dig into that, and if they're saying it's going to take 6 weeks to make, then you need to start to say to them things like, right, okay, well, if you place the orders with your suppliers now, how long will they take to deliver the components? Once you've got those components, what's then the timescale for assembly? And as you dig into the detail, you'll find that their original yes, yes, yes is actually maybe not quite as positive as it first sounded, but at least then you'll know in advance and you can manage the expectations of the people that you're selling the product to, retailers for example, or you can delay your launch a bit because you know that actually production is going to take a little bit longer. But planning and communication is critical for production timeline management. Now, all of this can seem a bit overwhelming. It doesn't need to be. There's a PDF, it's entirely free, it's linked in the description below. It's called Manufacturing 101. I suggest you download a copy and you can go through all of that, and it gives you a lot more detail on all the things that we're talking about. The final thing to do now before you can actually press go and get that first batch made is to finalize all of your documentation. So this should include an updated manufacturing specification if things have changed with any feedback that you've got from your target market or from your retailers. It should include exactly how you're going to do the quality control, how many you're going to test on the first batch and how that's going to be done. It might well include details of any of the particular components or materials that are coming in, any testing and certification that needs to be done. All of that needs clearly documenting and laying out so that everyone is on the same page. Now, you might want to involve a test house at this stage to make sure that what you're doing in terms of certification is everything that needs to be involved. And you need to think about which countries you're selling in, because not all countries have the same testing and certification requirements. Now, if you want some help with this, then my company can do all the heavy lifting. Get in touch. Just book a call, there's a link in the description below, and one of my experienced designers will talk you through how we can help and support you through this whole process. This is really critical. Now, we've got lots of clients at this stage at the moment, but there's one in particular I want to talk about. The lady has got a great new project. It's a textile product for the nursery industry. I can't tell you any more than that at the moment. And she's just got the samples back from the manufacturer, and unfortunately they're not right. But having a detailed manufacturing specification means that there's actually something she can go back to the manufacturer to point out what they've got wrong, rather than ending up having to be charged for yet another sample. So this does really matter because it makes the whole process of getting the sampling done and getting into production much more smooth, and it also makes it much cheaper as well. Now, this final point is critical. Getting your manufacturing right and getting your quality right is now a continuous iterative process. You want to keep working with your manufacturer to improve things, keep improving your documentation as any problems come up that are solved to make sure that they don't happen again. You probably want a written manufacturing contract so that everything is laid out in terms of delivery time frames, who owns what in terms of tooling, all of that type of thing. It may be that you're better off using an agent who can do a lot of this for you. And again, we've got some fantastic manufacturing agents who we highly recommend, who manufacture in lots of different countries across the world. If you need the right agent to manufacture your product, do get in touch and we can help with that. So there you have it. That's what happens in terms of how you go from an initial idea right the way through to all the manufacturing documentation that you need. As you can see, it is quite an involved process, but there's a lot of support on hand as well. Now, do check out this next video. It goes into manufacturing and these last stages in a lot more detail. I'll see you there.